அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி தானி பெரும் கருணை அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி 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 தானி பெரும் கருணை அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி 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 தானி பெரும் கருணை அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி
அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி தனிப்பெருங்கருணை அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி வாழின் பேரருள் வாழின் பெருஞ்சீர் வெல்கனின் பேரருள் வெல்கனின் பெருஞ்சீர் போற்றினின் பேரருள் போற்றினின் பெருஞ்சீர் ஆற்றலில் ஓங்கிய அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி. Thank you, Jayarajaya, for your kind words, for your appreciation. Always a pleasure to listen to your introductions and the way you compliment the speakers and participants. Thank you so much for your service here. I want to suggest also, before I get started here on this talk, that perhaps Vallala Universal Mission can find out if grants can be obtained for its project. This has to do, of course, with one of the great sons, as it were, of the Tamil Nadu province, Vallala, and his great contribution to Tamil language and literature. So perhaps you can explore opportunities for grants from the Tamil Nadu government. Now may not exactly be exactly the good time, but keep that in mind. And also the United States government, other foundations may be able to support it. One foundation that comes to my mind is the Templeton Foundation. Templeton Foundation, I think they are based in Philadelphia, but they support multicultural, multi-religious activities and so forth, and you may want to contact them to see if you can get a grant. So that's something to keep in mind. I am working on a book of essential teachings of Vallala. It will have Tamil on one page, and it will have the translation and any commentary necessary on the other side, on the other page. And I hope to finish that, perhaps in about 6 months or less. I'm actually planning to go into some kind of retirement, quote unquote, to work on this and other related matters, not least of which is the Suddha Sanmargam. So, hopefully I'll have some good news by the end of the 6 months or so, end of the year, by way of completing that book of essential teachings. Of course, it's not going to address everything that Vallala wrote. The early works and so forth will not be addressed, but what I think are the essential teachings, some of the songs, letters, the Vinnapangal, Jivagarnya Workam, and of course the great Agaval. So, let us hope that that comes to a successful completion with your best wishes and Vallala's grace. Okay, today's talk has to do with the abolition of hunger. And as you know, Vallala started the Satya Dharmasala on 23rd May 1867, and I was pointing some things out yesterday's Australian program, which unfortunately I was not able to participate in throughout, but I was there at least for a couple of hours. And I pointed out that it's interesting. He started the Satya Dharmasala in 1867, and he read from his great incomplete essay, Jivagarnya Workam, certainly the first part, and it is subtitled, as you know, Suddha Sanmargatin Mudar Sadhanam. So that's interesting. It's not the final step. but it's the first step. And then he went on to build or facilitate the building at the Tirukkuruppu of Arupperunjodi, the Satya Jnana Sabha, 1872, and then comes the Siddhi Valagam. And I pointed out yesterday that they correspond to actually stages in the path of Suddha Sanmargam. You start with Jivagaranyam, you go to the worship of Arupperunjodi, and finally you attain the Perenba Siddhi Peruvarvu. So it's interesting that those stages are reflected actually in the buildings or places that Vallalar brought into existence, Satya Dharmasalai, Satya Jnana Sabha, and Siddhi Valagam. Now, the Satya Dharmasalai, and again I pointed this out yesterday, but apparently the audio was not that good. I heard from one of the listeners. So, in case you missed parts of it yesterday, I'm going to basically recap some of it today. Satya Dharma Salai. So that word Satyam plays a very important role. I don't think Vallalar simply threw it in there. Both the Satya Jnana Sabha and Satya Dharma Salai, the word Satyam is a key word. And from the poems of Vallalar and also other writings, he uses that word quite frequently. And he does not use it frivolously or just throwing it in. He's dead serious and sincere in his use of that word. So what it means here is its true charity. So then we can ask, what is that true charity? Well, it is given regardless of caste, race, ethnicity, political preferences, and so forth. It is given, the charity here, primarily food, but some of you may know that distribution of medicines, clothing, free education, all of these were also associated with the Satya Dharma Salai. He wanted to have the associated institutions, to do those things in conjunction with the Satya Dharma Salai's main mission of feeding the hungry or the starving poor. So Satyam means regardless of all these superficial distinctions, Vedango. And it's contrasted with the Poi Dharmam. The moment you speak of Satya Dharmam, the question arises, well, is there Poi Dharmam and what is it? Well, in this context, it means Dharmam that is selective. That's not really universal compassion. It's not really Jivagarnyam, but it's more like partiality or preference. So you may have some party functionaries coming and distributing food in the area where they get support. And then they neglect other areas. And this is actually, according to some of the analysts on famine and so forth, this is a major problem today. They call it the transactional politics. That is doing politics as a kind of business. So if a customer comes and pays, then you deliver the product to that customer. A customer doesn't have the money to pay for the product, you don't deliver it. So the equivalent of money is the vote and the support. So you get votes and support from a particular area, and then the ruling party then goes and, does all kinds of good things there. And then if you have an area where they're supporting the opposed party, then you just neglect them or you barely give them anything. And this is a major contributor to problems of food distribution in many countries, including Africa and also in parts of India, I presume. So that is Poi Dharma. You go and give food to an area just because they support your party. That's not really dharma. Or you distribute food on the condition that they convert to a particular religion. The Christian missionaries, some of them are doing great work, don't get me wrong, but there's always this card that they want you to take. somehow that's supposed to be what you are expected to give in return for the food or whatever help you receive, is to accept the Bible and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not objecting to the study of the Bible or anything like that, but to do that charity work with the motive of spreading a particular religion, and then to exclude people who don't seem to be interested in that religion. You know, maybe there's a community of Muslims, and they may not be interested in the Bible, although Islam accepts Jesus as one of the prophets. You know, that is poidharmam, really, because you're not really interested in following Vallalar's principle, which was also expressed by Karl Marx, to each according to need. If I need clothing, then clothing is what needs to be given to me. If I need food, then food is what needs to be given to me, to each according to need. And so when you look at the hungry and starving, poor and destitute, they're going to die, suffer horribly and die without food, then that's all that matters. You give food to them. Whether they are Muslims or whether they are members of this party or that party, men or women, this caste or that caste, this race or that race, is completely irrelevant. And all that is really the emphasis of the word Satya Dharmam, a word Satya Dharmam in the Satya Dharmasali. And, you know, remember it was in 1867, way before any of these progressive social movements began to develop. So we can see Vallalar's far-sightedness, progressiveness, and a revolutionary approach in starting that kind of institution. The other revolutionary thing is the emphasis on vegetarian food. So you can have a lot of hunger relief projects, but they don't care if meat and other things are used as part of the hunger relief. But Vallalar is uncompromising on the truth that vegetarian food is the only thing that is consistent with Jivagarnya Varukam. And any non-vegetarian food is not compatible. As he says, you know, to harm and make a Jivan suffer and kill it, and then use its flesh to feed some other being who's hungry, is completely contrary to Jivagarnya Varukam and completely contrary to what he says, Kadavul Sammadam or divine law. So that's again a very revolutionary thing. Again, in 1867, for him to say that you must not only feed the hungry or the starving, but you must do so only with vegetarian food. And some may find that problematic today. They might say, well, you know, it's just it's hunger, so what's the problem in giving meat if that's going to satisfy the hunger? Well, that's where you are simply looking at one particular means, in this case, meat or non-vegetarian food, and you're not thinking about the underlying spiritual truths, moral truths, and even the impact of meat and so forth on the environment. You know, a lot of data is coming out on the harmful effects of the meat industry on the environment, not to mention health. The meat is loaded with antibiotics, which leads to antibiotic resistance by bacteria and other harmful organisms. Well, there are good bacteria too, but we're talking about the ones that can create problems. And that's a major issue now. The antibiotic resistance by bacteria that can cause serious health issues. And that's aggravated by meat and loading meat with all kinds of antibiotics. Not to mention the insai, as Vallalar says, the insai caused to Jivan by killing it and using its flesh. So you have to look at those things. You can't just simply say, I'm going to remove hunger and, well, you know, I'm just going to use whatever food that's available, fish, meat, chicken, or whatever. That's not really thinking about it carefully. And Malalar thought about it and saw the truths, the essential spiritual truths about Anma, Jivan, Arul, Pasi, and so forth, and that is all that underlies his uncompromising position that the removal of hunger or starvation must be done only with vegetarian food, and non-vegetarian food is totally unacceptable. So that really makes this whole thing, I mentioned yesterday, spiritual humanitarianism. And I'm not simply coining some words for fun or anything like that. It is spiritual humanitarianism because when you ask the question, why do we do pasinivrti as a priority, pasinivrti of hungry or starving poor people? If I invite a bunch of relatives who are hungry, who are well-to-do and so forth, that is not really Jivakarunyam. I mean, you can call it hospitality, but that's not Jivakarunyam as Vallalar views it. It has to be the poor and the destitute who are unable to find food by their own efforts and will starve to death if we don't provide them with food or some means by which they can obtain food. But the starving man, doesn't need any lectures or promises. The starving man needs food. Starving man need food. And that's really the emphasis of Jivakarunya work. I mean, it's very wide. There's a lot of wisdom there. And of course, it's highly ethical. You give food first to the starving person. So, one of the objections here is, they'll quote the Chinese proverb, which says, if you give fish to a hungry man, of course they're non-vegetarian in the non-vegetarian spirit, then okay, you're taking care of his hunger for now. But if you teach the person fishing, then you're solving that person's problem of hunger in the future, tomorrow, and so forth. It's a good point that, you have to, it's not just about feeding people. You also have to try and do things that will enable them to become self-sufficient or at least be able to find food by their own efforts. Yes, that's definitely a goal we should have, but what do you do in the meanwhile? Here now you see all these Erigal who don't have food and will starve to death. Okay? What do? You have to give them food. All else comes later. We'll have to give them shelter, give them some job skills, train them in some jobs so that, they can earn a wage and they have a means to buy food. All that comes later. Lecturing to a poor person about this Chinese proverb and, this or that political program and so on and so forth. After a revolution, nobody will be starving. All that is just, it's going to be hurtful to the person's ears, the person who's starving. Because, the urgent need, the immediate need is for food. And Vallalar saw through this. And, it's a great moral and spiritual insight. The priority is to feed them. And that doesn't mean you stop there, but that's the priority. This problem of the hunger that Jivakarunya work essentially deals with, it's not something that just Vallalar dealt with or it was there in the past and so forth. Now, in the 1980s, famine experts have pointed out there's been progress. There was a lot of progress in the 1980s on hunger relief. And famine was pushed back pretty significantly. But then it's starting to come back. And the COVID-19, according to many commentators, is going to make it worse. So I pointed this out yesterday. The UN, the beginning of May, the UN's humanitarian chief warned that without global cooperation and financial assistance, the number of people dying from hunger or hunger-related diseases could double this year. Okay? And according to the Mercy Corps website, 821 million people do not have enough of the food. I mean, it doesn't mean all of them are starving, but they don't have enough of the food. And 20 million people are currently at risk of famine in Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, and Nigeria. But this, as a result of this COVID-19, we're going to see a big increase in the numbers of people who are going to face the risk of starvation. But there is a solution. And the UN's humanitarian chief, Mark Lowcock, pointed this out. 90 billion is required, okay? The world's wealthiest countries can come up with 90 billion. That would be sufficient to take care of 700 million of the world's most vulnerable people, the ones that face the risk of starvation. And that may seem like a huge amount, but it's only 1.8% of the economic stimulus packages that all these rich countries have put together to deal with the economic impact of COVID-19. Just 1.8% of that. So it's certainly something they can all do and must do. And then the big question is, why are they not doing it, and what can we do to raise awareness of all this? Now, this is all something we need to become aware of and do whatever we can to communicate that information to others and so forth. But our immediate action, in accordance with Vallala's prescription directive in Jivagarnya Workam, is to do what we can to feed the hungry or starving that we know of. Okay, and I guess, we can start with wherever we are in the United States. We can start with people that we know in Tamil Nadu province to start with, and see what sort of contribution we can make. But the essence of Jivagarnya Workam is clearly stated in the Vilambaram, or notice, that came out on 23rd May 1867. It was not signed by Vallalar, but it's quite clear that Vallalar indicated it or approved it. And it's basically quoting from the essay, part 1 of Jivagarnya Workam. And it says that removing the hunger or starvation of poor or destitute people is the main goal of Jivagarnya Workam. Other things come into the picture, but this is the central thing. So that means to say that I'm practicing Jivagarnya Workam, I must be doing something to remove hunger or starvation or facilitate the removal of hunger or starvation of poor people. If I'm not doing that, I really cannot say I'm practicing Jivagarnya Workam. But we want to ask ourselves a fundamental question, and this takes us beyond some of the issues related with how do you contribute to hunger relief and so on and so forth, some practical things pertaining to that. This takes us to the foundation, this question, why do we practice Jivagarnya Workam? Why has Vallalar asked us to practice Jivagarnya Workam? Okay, and the answer to that comes as part of, and I'm working on this piece that you will soon see on my blog, Spiritual Humanitarianism, Abolition of Hunger. It's right there at the beginning of the essay, Jivagarnya Workam. He starts by pointing out that in this Manida Parappu, there is an Anma Labham or great spiritual good that can be attained. And that's part of the unique opportunity that this Manida Pirappu gives us. It's not there in any other Pirappu on this planet. It's there in Manida Pirappu. And what is that Anma Labham, or great spiritual good? கடவுளின் பூரண இயற்கை இன்பத்தை பெற்று எக்காலத்தும் எவ்விடத்தும் எவ்விதத்தும் எவ்வளவும் தடைப்படாமல் வாழ்கின்ற ஒப்பற்ற பெரிய வாழ்வு. And it's also there in the Vinnapam, Siru Vinnapam, Perunba Siddhi Peruvarvu. When Valalar speaks of Perunba Siddhi Peruvarvu, he's talking about the same thing. And in fact, Valalar uses pretty much the same words in that Siru Vinnapam. But there are some interesting things that come up, and I'll address them a little later. And it's a topic to be pursued in the future, and hopefully some of you might also be interested in pursuing it, doing vicharam. So in the Siruvinnapam, he says, again he refers to மரணம் பிணி மூப்பு பயம் துன்பம் முதலிய அவத்தைகள் எல்லாவற்றையும் தவிர்த்து எக்காலத்தும் எவ்விடத்தும் எவ்விதத்தும் எவ்வளவும் தடைப்படாத பேரின்ப சித்தி பெருவாழ்வு பெருவாழ்வை அடைதல் கூடும் என்றும். So this is the goal, and it is part of realizing கடவுளின் பூரண இயற்கை இன்பம், that is அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி. We're not talking about Krishna or Rama or Hanuman and so forth. Kadavul here is அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி. So கடவுளின் பூரண இயற்கை இன்பத்தை பெறுதல், that is the goal. That's how he starts the essay. He doesn't start with some moral argument about, which comes later, but he doesn't start with the moral argument about, our ethical obligations and so forth to remove hunger of other people. It's essentially starting with a spiritual goal. That's why I call it, the perspective I call it spiritual humanitarianism. It's humanitarianism motivated by spiritual values and based on spiritual truths. That's what's distinctive of Suddha Sanmargam. Otherwise, it would not be any different from, humanitarianism, many forms of humanitarianism. That means an approach that wants to remove the sufferings of human beings. Now, of course, as you know, Suddha Sanmargam does not confine itself only to human beings, but Valalar in this Yoganya Workam is very clear that priority is given to human beings. Doesn't mean we should neglect animals and plants, but priority is given to human beings, and he gives some very good reasons why that's the case. Now back to this goal, the central goal that is affirmed at the very beginning of Yoganya Workam, கடவுளின் பூரண இயற்கை இன்பத்தை பெற்று எக்காலத்தும் எவ்விடத்தும் எவ்விதத்தும் எவ்வளவும் தடைப்படாமல் வாழ்கின்ற ஒப்பற்ற பெரிய வாழ்வு. That is our goal. And it is part of the realizing Arupparinjodi. And then the next question is, how do I attain that? If you say that this is the great Anma Labham that I can attain as a result of taking Manida Piravi, how do I do this? How do I attain this? And this is where I'm putting it, and I'll elaborate on this in a post. You may have heard of Buddha's Four Noble Truths. First noble truth is there is suffering and it's universal. Second noble truth is suffering has a cause, and that's desire or craving. Third noble truth is there is a way out of suffering. And the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path, as Buddha calls it, is the way out of suffering. Now, I think Valalar has, I would say, 6, perhaps 7 noble truths in this Jivagarmya Workam and across his approach. And the first noble truth, as I put it, of Suddha Sanmargam is this: கடவுளின் பூரண இயற்கை இன்பத்தை பெற்று எக்காலத்தும் எவ்விடத்தும் எவ்விதத்தும் எவ்வளவும் தடைபடாமல் வாழ்கின்ற ஒப்பற்ற பெரிய வாழ்வே இந்த மனித பிறப்பினால் அடையத்தக்க ஆன்ம லாபம் என்று உண்மையாக அறிய வேண்டும். Again, notice, உண்மையாக அறிய வேண்டும், சத்தியம் and so forth. The second noble truth is the answer to the question, how do I attain this Anmalabam? Perin Basitti Peruvarvu. And Vallalar puts it in the Jivakarnya Workam essay, part 1, இயற்கை இன்பத்தை பெற்று, அதாவது கடவுளின் இயற்கை இன்பத்தை, அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி ஆண்டவர் இயற்கை இன்பத்தை பெற்று, தடைப்படாமல் வாழ்கின்ற அந்த பெரிய வாழ்வை எதனால் அடையக்கூடும் என்று அறிய வேண்டில். And gives the answer. கடவுளின் இயற்கை விளக்கமாகிய அருளை கொண்டே அடையக்கூடும் என்று அறிய வேண்டும். Now, yes. So the translation here is this. So if it is asked, how do we realize the inherent and absolute bliss of the Omni-Light, Arupparanjodi, that is the Iyarkkai Inbam, inherent and absolute bliss, and ascend to the incomparable, Opatra, Periya Varvu, they call it the Paripadada and so forth, the supernal life. It is not earthly life. It is not the life that humans and animals know in common. Tini, Bayam, and Maranam, and so forth. Tadaigal. Different varieties of Tadaigal and so forth. This Peruvarvu is completely higher Varvu. So I use the word supernal. Means it's celestial, kind of celestial. It's high above all of this earthly, terrestrial life. Incomparable supernal life free from all limitations. If the question is asked, how do we realize the inherent and absolute bliss of the Omni-Light and ascend to the incomparable supernal life free from all limitations, it should be known that it is attained only by means of its natural or inherent light of grace or supreme compassion force, Arul. So Arul generally is translated as grace, but that kind of evokes Christian notions of grace as, God looks at you with compassion and takes care of you and so forth. It misses something else in Arul, in Suddha Sanmargam. This is not just Arul, but it's Arut Sakti. Okay, that Arut Sakti is the fundamental and the most powerful force in the universe. Okay, it brings about all the Sati Satargal, all the Talaivargal, all the Andangal and Pindangal and so forth, Tatuangal and so forth. So it is the omnipotent force. And that's why I call it supreme compassion force. Not again just making these words up. They capture the meaning of Arul the way Vallalar uses it. So it's not just grace, but, still use it to convey some idea of the concept or of the reality. So it's attained, this Peruvarvu is attained, Perumbasitti Peruvarvu is attained only by means of Arul, or the Supreme Compassion Force. And, the argument for this, what I call the second noble truth of Suddha Sanmargam, is quite clear. Arupparanjodi Andavar is Opatra Kadavul. I mean, there is nothing above and beyond Arupparanjodi. So that means nothing external to Arupparanjodi can lead us to the experience and realization of its Iyarkkai Inbam. Only its own force, its own power, Arul, can help us to realize its Iyarkkai Inbam and attain the Perumbasitti Peruvarvu. I think it's a beautiful, it's a simple, it's a very compelling knockdown argument. Nothing else can force this realization of Arupparanjodi. Only Arupparanjodi's own Arutsakti can bring about the realization. And in the Upanishads, it's you find an echo of this, although it's not as clear as it is in the Jivakarnya Workam essay. In the Upanishads, I think one of the Upanishads says, you realize the Atman only if the Atman chooses you. So meaning, you can go here and there and stand on your head, do whatever, but you are not going to be able to force the realization of the Atman. It's only by way of Atman's grace, as it were. The Atman selects you, chooses you to reveal itself. Then you realize the Atman. Now, something like that is what Vallallar is saying, although it's, much more profound here with this Arutsakti and everything. So you can realize Arupparanjodi Andavar only with the help of the Arutsakti of this Arupparanjodi Andavar. Okay? Because there can't be anything external that can force the realization. That takes us to the third noble truth, which is the answer to the natural question. Okay, கடவுளின் இயற்கை இன்பத்தை பெற்று or realizing that and attaining this பேரம்ப சித்தி பெருவாழ்வு is the goal that I can attain in மனித பிறப்பு. How do I attain it? Only by receiving, realizing and receiving கடவுள் சொரர் பெருஞ்சோதி's Arutsakti, which is the force that underlies everything in the universe. How do I attain this? How do I realize this Arul? How do I receive it? And Vallallar brings in Jivagarniya workam in this context. கடவுளின் இயற்கை வழக்கமாகிய அருளை எதனால் பெறக்கூடும் என்று அறிய வேண்டும். சிவகாரணிய ஒழுக்கத்தினால் கடவுள் அருளை பெறக்கூடும் அல்லது வேறெந்த வழியாலும் சிறிதும் பெறக்கூடாது என்று உறுதியாக அறிதல் வேண்டும். Now, I also want to say here that, I know most of you, perhaps all of you are familiar with the Jivagarniya workam, but I think the readings help. Even though I have read Jivagarniya workam several times, every time I read passages, it's very inspiring. Very illuminating. It's almost some kind of energy comes into you by reading and meditating on the words. So, it doesn't matter if we have read this 100 times. It's still good to use it as part of reading. This is the practice of Swadhyaya in the yoga system. Swadhyaya means reading these great texts. Because when you read the words written by these great people, like Vallallar, the words carry a force and energy. And if your mind is receptive, it doesn't matter how many times you've read before, you still feel that when you read it again. So I'm doing all this in that spirit. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to preach to you something that you don't know already. But I'm just using these as readings. So, கடவுளின் இயற்கை வழக்கமாகிய அருளை எதனால் பெறக்கூடும் என்று அறிய வேண்டும். சிவகாரணிய ஒழுக்கத்தினால் கடவுள் அருளை பெறக்கூடும் அல்லது வேறெந்த வழியாலும் சிறிதும் பெறக்கூடாது என்று உறுதியாக அறிய வேண்டும். So this was in the 1867 when he was going through this Daiva stage. So it just came to me early this morning, a completely different perspective on this, but I'll talk about it later. Now here he says, வேறெந்த வழியாலும் சிறிதும் பெறக்கூடாது என்று உறுதியாக அறிதல் வேண்டும். Translation, if it is asked, how do we obtain or receive the natural or inherent light of grace or the supreme compassion force, Arul, of the omni-light, Kadavul, it should be known with certainty that it is realized and obtained only by the practice of compassion for living beings, Jivagarniya workam, not by any other means or method. So that's going to raise some other issues, and I think Prasanna, was on to some of the issues with this, I think, in some earlier talk. And now I see where he was coming from, and I think I have a resolution, but I'll talk about it later. So not by any other means or method, only by Jivagarniya workam, which then raises the question, why is that? Why is Jivagarniya workam the only means or method to realize and obtain Arul, without which we cannot ascend to the Peramba Siddhi Peruval? Okay. Now, I want to say here, we have to think about Vallallar's descriptions of this Peramba Siddhi Peruval and so forth. We have to meditate on this. And then we have to reflect on our own present condition. If we think that the Varkai that we have, regardless of our achievements or economic status or whatever it is that we have, if we think that that Varkai is the end-all and be-all of existence, we are deluded. we don't really understand reality. Our Varke can change in a moment. It's anityam. Dukkhamum anityamum, Vallalar mentions, and the Bhagavad Gita also points that out. This life can change at any moment. So she saw this with this SARS-CoV-19 virus. This came out, and within a few months, the biggest economy in the world and the second largest economy in the world, they're all tottering. Taken by surprise by this minute particle, right? They call it nanoparticle. Virus is a nanoparticle. It's not even living. And it's brought world economies to their knees. Disrupted the lives of millions of people, not to mention dispatching so many to the other world and to rebirth. So you can't, we cannot persist in the delusion. And it's quite this, it's not an easy thing. It's easier said than done to realize that this money the war as we're living, whether we are in America, which unfortunately some people, it's quite sad, people in other parts of the world, including India, imagine to be some kind of Swargam. No, it's not Swargam. I mean, there are advantages, but there's a lot of elements of Naragam also in these countries. And so it doesn't matter. It's the same human Varke, and it's subject to the same limitations and sufferings. So we have to really, and I think it can come only as a result of experiences, and that is where experiences of suffering and struggle and so forth carry a great lesson and actually help us on the spiritual path if we know how to look at them and how to draw the correct lessons from them. Okay? As long as you're living in some kind of rut of comfort and some limited security, you can fall into the delusion that, that's the best life and you don't need to look at anything else. But the blows of fate will come. Suffering comes in various forms. And that should come as a reminder, and comes as a reminder that this life that we think is great just because we're living in America or we're rich or whatever, or you're some Mukesh Ambani that's making $10 billion a month, it's still fragile. It can still be subject to various kinds of sufferings, anxieties and fears and so forth, the disease and all that. And when you think about it, then this ideal, or in fact a reality of Peramba Siddhi Paruvar becomes more meaningful. So we have to be in that state, and that can only come after some bitter life experiences. You have to be in that state where this goal of Peramba Siddhi Paruvar begins to make more and more sense to you, and you're getting tired of this money the war as it's usually lived. Okay? It's a round of pleasures and pains and sufferings and worries and anxieties and taragal and so forth. If you haven't reached that stage, then you're not really ready for Vallalar's teaching. And I guess you continue and perhaps one day, reach that stage where this money the Varka, you begin to think there must be something higher than this money the Varka. And all you need to do is take a look at the first few paragraphs of Jivagarnya Workam, and it tells you what is higher, the Peramba Siddhi Paruvar. So, back to the point about how Jivagarnya Workam is the only means to getting Arul, which is the only way to attaining that Peramba Siddhi Paruvar. Why is Jivagarnya Workam the only means? Now, I want to point out here that I think there is a shift in Vallalar's approach. And I've not seen any discussion or exploration of this. It's a shift and it's an advance. He has gone beyond the Jivagarnyam, but he's not abandoning Jivagarnyam, but he has gone beyond it in the Agaval and the Vinnapagam. And the reason why I'm saying it before I return again to Jivagarnya Workam and this point that it is the only means, which I think Vallalar has changed. in the Vinnapangal. So if you look at the Vinnapangal, you will notice that he does not mention Asinavati. He does not even mention Jivakarnya Workam. Now, this doesn't mean he's rejected it, but it's interesting to observe that. We have to note that the Vinnapangal don't talk about Jivakarnya Workam or Pasinavati. Instead, in the Siruvinnappa, he says, இப்பருவத்தினிடத்தே எல்லா அண்டங்களையும் எல்லா உலகங்களையும் எல்லா உயிர்களையும் எல்லா பொருள்களையும் மற்ற எல்லாவற்றையும் தோற்றுவித்தும் விளக்கம் செய்வித்தும் துர்சினிக்குவித்தும் பக்குவருவித்தும் பலன் தருவித்தும் எங்கும் பூரணராகி விளங்குகின்ற, that's why I use the expression omni-light. It's எங்கும் பூரணராகி விளங்கும் ஒளி. ஓர் உண்மை கடவுள் உண்டென்றும் அக்கடவுளை உண்மை அன்பார் கருத்திற்கருதி வழிபாடு செய்யன் அக்கடவுள் திருவருள் நமது கருத்தின் கண் வெளிப்பட்டு விளங்கும் என்றும் அத்திருவருள் விளக்கத்தால் மரணம், பிணி, மூப்பு, பயம், துன்பம் முதலிய அவஸ்தைகள் எல்லாவற்றையும் தவிர்த்து எக்காலத்தும் எவ்விடத்தும் எவ்விதத்தும் எவ்வளவும் நடைபெறாத பேரன்ப சித்தி பெருவாழ்வை அடைதல் கூடும் என்றும் எங்கள் அறிவில் தேவரீர் திருவருளால் உண்மைப்பட உணர்த்தி அருளப் பெற்றோம். It's a key passage because here it is saying that அக்கடவுளை உண்மை அன்பார் கருத்திற்கருதி வழிபாடு செய்யின் அக்கடவுள் திருவருள் நமது கருத்தின் கண் வெளிப்பட்டு விளங்கும். See, it is not saying Jivakarnya Workam and Pasinavati onre and the Arul Valakam it will bring about. No, it is and the Kadavulai Unmai Anbar, and this is where I was, in fact, this morning, I was thinking about the great poem, song, Vallalaar that Jayaraja read, and I was a little surprised because I don't believe he has, maybe he read it in past occasions, but I was thinking of that because this Siruvinnapam is saying, and the Kadavulai Unmai Anbar Karuthu Vaipaadu Seyyin, and Anbu, of course, is the theme of this song. Anbenum Vidiyil Agakpadum Malaye, Anbenum Kudil Pugum Arase, Anbenum Valaikutpadum Haram Porule, Anbenum Karattamar Amude, Anbenum Karatul Adangidum Kadale, Anbenum Uir Wolir Arive, Anbenum Anuvul Amainda Peroliye, Anburuwa Parasole. Unparalleled in its beauty and power, you know. I mean, if somebody can translate all that in English and convey the beauty and power, that would be a great achievement. You know, so it is Anbu, Unmai Anbar, that is also known as true bhakti, not superficial, casual one or, like a hobby. Bhakti is a hobby or part-time thing, but true bhakti, that is this Unmai Anbu. And he says, Karuttir Karidi Vazhipaadu, that is, you have to contemplate in your mind. And then that's connected with Karana Workam and so forth. And I've started a piece now, a series in my blog called The Fourfold Path. And that also comes into the picture because we want to ask the question, what is the relationship between Jivakarnya Workam, the Nangu Workangal, okay, and this practice of Unmai Anbar Karuttir Karudi Vazhipaadu Seidal in relation to the goal of obtaining Arul. That is our goal, because without Arul we cannot ascend to the Perunda Siddhi Peruvarvu. You have Jivakarnya Workam, and in the essay Vallalaar says Jivakarnya Workam Onre, he says, that's the only means. But then in the Siruvinnappa, composed 5 years when he attained enlightenment. So now, it's my view again, my interpretation that Vallalaar's complete enlightenment is expressed, and Siddhi is expressed in the Agavo. Now, I think in the Jivakarnyam stage, he was still progressing. And so at that stage, and perhaps he wanted to inspire people and so forth to do certain things as Mudar Sadhanam. So he may have said, at that time, I think it might have looked to him that Jivakarnya Workam is the only thing. But we don't have to completely dismiss that point. We can still hold, and Vallalar himself says in the Perupadesam, Dayavu is what lifted him. Remember that? Dayavu. In the male Nilaki Dayavu. So that is, of course, Jivakaranya Workam. So Jivakaranya Workam is essential. But it is not the only thing that will bring about Arul, because if you do Pasi Nivatti, and you are not... Okay, yeah, I was saying that in the Siruvinnapam, Vallalar does not say that Jivakaranya Workam is the only means. He does not even mention Jivakaranya Workam. Of course, that doesn't mean he rejects Jivakaranya Workam. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what he is emphasizing as the means to obtaining Arul is Arupurunjodi Kadavulai Unmai Anba Karuttul Karidi Vazhipaadu Seidal. So this changes our perspective on Jivakaranya Workam and its place, especially the Pasi Nivatti. That is preparatory. Of course, he's titled it as Mudar Sadhanam, so it's not the final stage. It's the first stage. But it changes our perspective on whether Jivakaranya Workam alone can take us to Arul. And in light of what he says in the Vinnapangal, especially the Siruvinnapam, in light of what he says in the Agaval and so forth, and of course the four Workangal, we have to ask what is the role of the four Workangal. How do they come into the picture? How do they relate to Jivakaranya Workam and what Vallalar has said in the Siruvinnapam? These are all very important questions to ask and pursue so that we can have a very clear understanding of Suddha Sanmargam. It's important to have clear understanding. The Buddha said the right view. You have to have the right, correct view of Suddha Sanmargam. And then, of course, it's not just simply having right or correct view, it is practicing it. But you have to have the correct or right view to start with. So somebody brought this up yesterday. I think it was a doctor, Vinayakamurthy perhaps. He was saying, sometimes we hear the objection that some people are saying they are practicing Jivakaranya Workam, but nothing much has changed. They haven't attained Arupurunjodi. Well, first is you have to look at the spirit with which you practice it. So the Pasi Nivatti, as Vallalar says, has to be kind of like a Varadam. And as I pointed out, it has to be like it's part of spiritual practice. You're not doing just social work or just upliftment of the poor. Some people take that approach, that's fine. But in Suddha Sanmargam, we have a different approach. Our approach is spiritual. It's Anmigam. And you're trying to remove that Pasi because you're trying to develop Jivakaranya Workam, and that is regarded as the first and foremost method or means to develop Jivakaranya Workam. That is to remove the Pasi of the poor and destitute. If you don't feel compassion for the starvation of the poor and the destitute, how are you going to feel compassion for anything else? And in fact, Vallalar makes a very persuasive psychological argument in the Jivakaranya Workam. He says if you develop compassion for the hungry or the starving, you will naturally be compassionate enough to prevent murder or kolai, to help in whatever way you can with the pini and all that, varumai and all that. So that's a very compelling argument he gives. So that's why we focus on Pasi Nivatti. But Pasi Nivatti is done to develop compassion. And it is done to increase our awareness of the Anma Vilakkam and Kadavul Vilakkam. The illumination of the soul's light of knowledge that is there, but it's covered up by Anavam and all that, and the inherent Kadavul Vilakkam that is also there in every soul, and also the body. It is there, but whether or not it is fully manifested is a different matter. So we're doing it in order to cultivate awareness, develop understanding of these spiritual truths. We're not just doing social work. We're not even doing just something that is ethically obligatory. We're engaging in spiritual practice. That's distinctive of Suddha Sanmargam, that you do these things as part of your essential, these are essential to spiritual practice. And in the Jivakarnya Workam, he says that essentially he's saying Pasi Nivarti is the only means is the central means to obtain Arul, because Jivakarnya Workam is the only means to obtain Arul, and Jivakarnya Workam is essentially Pasi Nivarti of the poor and the destitute. Then it follows logically that Pasi Nivarti of the poor and destitute is the only means of achieving Arul. But in the Siruvinnapam, you can see he does not mention, again, I've repeated this several times, it's worth repeating. He does not mention Jivakarnya Workam or Pasi Nivarti. He is talking about Unmai Anbar, Karutthil Karidri, Varipadu Seidal. And so that's where we move from the Satya Dharmasthale stage to the Satya Jnana Sabha stage. And in the Satya Jnana Sabha, it's all about Unmai Anbal, Karutthil Arparanjori Andavare, Karutthil Karidi Varipadu Seidal. That's what Satya Jnana Sabha represents. And then Siddhi Valagam represents the Perenba Siddhi Peruvarvu. So there is some very interesting spiritual symbolism of these three structures, Satya Dharmasthale, Satya, and Siddhi Valagam. We have to keep in mind, and I always think it's always good to start at the Satya Dharmasthale, make some donation to feeding the poor, or maybe take some food packets and feed the poor, and then go to the Jnana Sabha, spend some time singing Agalu verses and meditating. I've done that, and then finally go to the Siddhi Valagam and spend some time meditating on Agalu verses and so forth, Vinnapangal, in the Siddhi Valagam environment. So, any case, my point is that in the Jivakarnya Workam, he says that Pasi Nivarti, abolition of hunger, by which I mean abolition of starvation, is the only means to obtaining Arul, but that's not the case in the Siruvinnapam. So that then raises the question of what is really the place of Pasi Nivarti in Suddha Sanmargam. It is meant to be part of the practice of development of compassion or dayavu. And we should not lose sight of the fact that we are developing dayavu in order to obtain Arul, which is the greater fire, as he puts it, the greater illumination, Periya Neruppu. As Valara puts it, Siriya Neruppu, that is Jivargal dayavu, Adan Mulamaga, using it as a means to get the Periya Neruppu or Arul, which is Kadavul's dayavu. We have to always keep that in mind. If we lose sight of that, then we are missing the point, and we're not really practicing Suddha Sanmargam. So when I feed someone that's poor and destitute, hungry or starving, I have to contemplate that, and these things are already there in the Jivakarnya Workam essay, that this Pasi in Tumbam is the worst kind of Tumbam or suffering. And when you're giving food, the Trupti is actually the highest form of Trupti, Anma Trupti and so forth, and Anma Valakam coming out in the face of the person who has taken that badly needed food and now has assuaged the hunger with that help, the starvation, Pasiyanam Korea tail. Sting of it, Korea tail. So I have to keep all that in mind. If I don't keep that in mind, and if I'm just doing it as charity work, humanitarian work, and so forth, social work, and so forth, I'm not really following Suddha Sanmargam. And I'm just wondering, that could be the reason. Some people are doing it as a kind of, routine charity thing. And they're not continuing seriously with the spiritual practice, of which this Jivakarnya Workam Pasi Nivarti is a basic element, fundamental element. And that's why perhaps then they feel that although they are doing Pasinivritti and all that, they are not making any spiritual progress. You see? And the explanation is there in the Siruvinnappam and also the Workangal. I posted something on the Workangal. I just dealt with the Indriya Workam, and I'll be posting on the Karana Workam and Jiva Workam and Anma Workam soon. But the Workangal also come into the picture, and in fact, Jivagarnyam is being translated into these Workangal. So you can see that, Vallalar, when he talks about the Indriya Workam, when he says, let's take the Karmendriya Indriyam and Jnanendriya Indriyam, senses of action, senses of knowledge. He takes sight, for instance. He says, Kururama Paradiruttal, refrain from casting cruel looks. And I improvise on that and I say refrain from using the eyes to express dislike, contempt, hate, envy. Refrain from gazing at cruel scenes or acts. This is all a way of practicing. This is all a way of developing dayavu or compassion. See? It's using the senses, as I say here in this post. You're harnessing the senses to practice Jivagarnya Workam. The main objective is to regulate and harness these senses of action and knowledge in the practice of the ethic of compassion for living beings. Jivagarnya Workam comes into play. It's operating when you follow these rules that Vallalar has given for these Workangal. And in fact, when you look at the Jiva Workam, and you see that, Vallalar says, under Jiva Workam, he says, Anmakkal, Penmakkal, முதலிய யாவர்களிடத்திலும் ஜாதி சமயம் மதம் ஆசிரமம் சூத்திரம் கோத்திரம் குலம் சாஸ்திர சம்பந்தம் தேசமார்க்கம் உயர்ந்தோர் தாழ்ந்தோர் என்னும் பேதம் நீங்கி எல்லாவரும் தமவர்களால் சமத்தல் கொள்வது ஜீவ ஒழுக்கமா. And that's ஆன்மநேய ஒருமைப்பாடு. That's basically what it is. And Jivagaranyam and Armaneya Urmepadu are connected. They influence each other. The more you develop a sense of Armaneya Urmepadu, the more dayavu you have, and the more dayavu you have, it enriches and deepens your sense of Armaneya Urmepadu, or sense of soul kinship with all living beings, all Jivagal, which is what Jiva Workam is asking us to do. Don't make these artificial distinctions and discriminate, but have this attitude of equality towards them. And it's not just samattal kolluvathu, it's orumai, but you have to have samattal kolluvathu, or equality, attitude of equality, before you can have unity. If you discriminate and so forth, rich versus poor and men versus women and this and that, caste and all that, then you don't have equality, the perspective of equality, but you're also going to fail to have that sense of unity, which is Anmaneya Urmepadu. So the Workangal bring into play Jivagarnya Workam. Especially when he says under Indriya Workam, he says, Jiva himsai nerum kalathil evvida sandirathanalavadu tadai seival. Jiva ubagara nimittamai sadhukal vasathalangalilum divya tirupadigalum sanjarittal. Nanmuyarchiyil koduttal eduthaladi seidal. So all again, putting to work Jivagarnya Workam. Ask, what are some practical ways and so forth. The answer is already here in the Workangal. So the Workangal then incorporate Jivagarnya Workam and help us to form the foundation for the essential practice of Unmai Anba Karuttul Karudi Vazhipadu Seidal. Arupparanjodi Kadavai. Okay? Unmai Anbal Karuttul Karudi Vazhipadu Seidal. That is what will bring about the Arul Vilakkam in the Siruvinnappam, which is, of course, the late stage and writings of Vallalar. So essentially the picture now looks like this, at least to me. We want to attain the Iyarkai Inbam of Arupparanjodi. We want to realize the Iyarkai Inbam of Arupparanjodi. Notice we're talking about Inbam, joy or bliss. And I have mentioned this in other talks. Suddha Sanmargam is a path of joy. Of course, you consider suffering and you do what you can to remove it, but this is not some doom and gloom, blues tunes every day. We're not singing blues tunes. Blues, as you know, is sorrowful. Soga Ragangal. This is not a path of Soga Ragangal, always singing these Soga Ragangal about suffering and this and that. No. This is a path of Inbam, Purana Inbam. Our goal is to attain Kadavul's Purana Iyarkai Inbam. And the means to attain it is Kadavul's own Arut Sakti. That goes without saying. And how do we attain that Arut Sakti? We have Jivagaranyam development, compassion development, and that really is based on Pasinivarti. But that's not sufficient. That's the main point that I'm making. So it's a revision of something that I think Vallalar himself seems to indicate that revision. As I pointed out in the Siruvinnapam, he's not mentioning Jivagarnyam or Pasinivarti. He's only talking about Kadavulai Unmayanbal Karutthir Karuthi Vaipaadu Seidal. So the Jivagarnyam is there as a foundation, and the essential part of it is Pasinivarti. Then we have the Vurukangal. That's also part of the foundation, which, and as I pointed out, the Vurukangal translate Jivagarnyam into specific actions. Then we have, and when I say then, I mean everything is done together, but, we know what the foundation is, so we pay more attention to the foundation at the start. We have we have the essential thing. Again, Arupparanjodi Kadavulai, Unmai Anbar Karuthir Karuthi Vaipaadu Seidal. If we don't have that, Arupparanjodi Kadavulai Unmai Anbar Karuthil Karuthi Vaipaadu Seidal, and all these songs, as long as they're expressing true bhakti. And we have to sing these things, we have to quote the passages, sing the verses, repeat the verses with the Unmai Anbu. We can't do it mechanically, half-heartedly, if I hear someone, and what is the test of that? Well, how do we know that true bhakti is operating? You have to feel some kind of inspiration. You have to feel that the person is actually putting their heart, soul, and body into that. Just simply on the lips is not going to, as they say, cut it. You have to put your whole being into this. So, doing all that is part of the practice of Unmai Anbar Karuthil Karuthi Vaipaadu Seidal. But as Vallalar says in the Jivagarnya work, if you do meditation and all that, and if you don't have Jivagaranyam, it's not going to bear fruit. So that's why it's all connected. It's connected, and you can't say only Jivagaranyam. As I said, that's been revised in the Satya Siruvinnapam. Jivagaranyam is there, but it's not the only thing. And Vurukangal are there. Jivagarnyam and the Jivagarnyam comes into the picture in the Vurukangal. And all that is just aiding the practice of Arupparanjodi Kadavulai Unmayanbar Karuthil Karuthi Vaipaadu Seidal. That is the essential and highest practice that we have to focus on. So I've changed my perspective. Initially, I wanted to go along with Vallalar's argument in the Jivagarnya Workam and emphasize, and I did that yesterday. But my perspective has changed. Hopefully, it's moving toward the correct perspective. And as I said, I have the support of the Satya Siruvinnapam in this. And the Agaval also says, of course, Inge Karuna Iyarkai Ullana Ange Valangi Aruppan Suvame, Yare Eninum Nirangagendrarka Sire Alikum Sudambara Some. So that Karuna is there, but it is not the only thing. It's preparatory. It helps you to practice, apply it in practicing the Vurukangal and forms the foundation for the most important thing, that is, அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி கடவுளை உண்மை அன்பால் கருத்தில் கருதி வழிபாடு செய்தல். So I hope I've given you, there are a number of things I can pursue, but unfortunately, that's going to extend the time. I have to return to some things, and you also have things to do. So I would just put it this way, that the Pasinivritti certainly needs to be done. Various things can be done to do that. You can donate food. And remember, it's all vegetarian food. We can go into the arguments for vegetarianism on another occasion, but you already know the main rationale, support for it. You can donate food packets, help in the distribution of food, and these days, of course, you have to take the adequate precautions. But I think, and I pointed this out to Mr. Ramalingam yesterday, or that was my implicit suggestion, we have to think in terms of having a dharmasali. That's following Vallar's example. So you have dharmasali, something you can rent and where you can take your food packet, and I'm talking primarily of Indian conditions. Maybe it's possible here too. Maybe a van can be rented and you can distribute food packets. Vegetarian food, of course, sandwiches, vegetarian sandwiches, fruit, soup, pasta with vegetables and so forth. You can do that, but these are individual actions. Foremost, as I think, is the establishing a dharmasali, perhaps accessible to people that are poor and destitute, and they can come and have food, so they don't need to starve. But that's individual action, and that's fine. But I think that, sometimes you'll have the criticism by Marxists, communists, and so forth. They'll come and say, well, you're just giving him food, but the problem is still going to be there. He's going to come back again tomorrow with food and so forth for food. How long is this going to go on? We can only solve the problem by changing social and economic policies. Now, I agree that we have to bring about a change in social and economic policies, but as I pointed out, Vallar's great wisdom and common sense is that the starving man needs food. Okay? That's the immediate need. He doesn't need talk about political platforms and this and that. So we have to take care of the immediate need. But then we can also work in terms of joining groups to change social and economic policies. Political candidates that are more favorable to starting dharmasalis or food kitchens and devoting our valuable tax dollars to doing that. Or we can start actually our own party. I was thinking about Suddha Sanmargam Makkal Kachi or Sanmargam Makkal Kachi, and then it came to me, Jivagarunya Makkal Kachi. So the Party of Compassionate People, or the Party of Compassion, People's Party of Compassion. Okay? That's what we should also think about. All these projects of getting the literature together and everything, they're all laudable, but let's not lose sight of Pasinivritti. And then in that context, political organization needs to be done. Of course, it's all done non-violently. We have to either field candidates that will make Pasinivritti a priority, or support candidates that are sympathetic to having Pasinivritti addressed systematically, not once in a while pass this legislation or that legislation, but do it systematically. And, actually the Pasinivritti project can put a lot of people to work. The vegetarian food, growing it and cooking and packaging it and distributing it, that can put a lot of people to work, can give employment to farmers, distributors, and so forth. And as Sanmargis, we can oversee and participate to the extent we can in this, financially and otherwise. So political organization, in addition to starting dharmasalas, I see as essential to fulfilling Vallalar's requirement of Jivaganya Workam. That requirement, of course, is Pasinavarti, So there are a number of things we can do, and then, questions can be asked about what sort of vegetarian food, and, there's a whole range of things. It's not just vegetables, rice, wheat, barley, so many things, lentils, beans. I was mentioning yesterday that the monitors of food security and so forth, international monitors, point out that India seems to be lagging behind in protein-rich food, distribution of protein-rich food, and then immediately they start talking about meat, fish, chicken, and so forth. But in fact, the available information on beans shows us that that provides plenty of protein. Beans, lentils, parupu, and so forth. And then if you bring tofu into the picture, that's plenty of protein. Peanut butter gives you protein. So a combination of these things will take care of that. And so we don't need to worry about any kind of nutritional deficiency in the provision of vegetarian food. There's plenty in vegetarian diet to take care of all our nutritional needs. And let's not forget, we all always have vitamin and mineral supplements. I take B12 supplements. I don't take meat to have B12. I take B12 supplements. So there's a lot of supplemental stuff that you can take, of course, with caution. So, it's a doable thing. We just have to, again, sit down and chalk out a program, like the Sanmargam Vritti. Perhaps Vallalar Universal Mission can take it up, and I'm certainly thinking of taking it up on my own in association with others. A Pasi Nivritti project, hunger relief project, as part of Suddha Sanmargam. So Suddha Sanmargam Pasi Nivritti project. So then it'll be vegetarian, and it's going to be part of the spiritual practice of Suddha Sanmargam, which I've been emphasizing all along. So in any case, let's again acknowledge the great teachings of Vallalar, the great path of Suddha Sanmargam, which puts Pasi Nivritti, a very noble goal, as an essential part of spiritual practice, And so we have to do that as spiritual practice, as part of spiritual practice, in relation to the work angle and in relation to the contemplation, meditation, worship of Artha and Yogi. That's what makes us Suddha Sanmargis, okay? And that needs to be really conveyed, that we're doing this as an essential part of spiritual practice, and to show what the connections are. Now, it won't do to simply say, I'm doing this as part of spiritual practice in Suddha Sanmargam. We have to explain clearly how it's part of the spiritual practice of Suddha Sanmargam. Okay? And again, want to end with this note. We cannot lose sight of the goal of the Perenba Siddhi Peruvarval and its essential means, which is Arul or Arut Sakti. If we lose sight of that, then we're not following Suddha Sanmargam. Thank you very much for your patience, and I appreciate the audience and the audience interest and commitment to Suddha Sanmargam. And I can only pray that Vallalar's blessings will be on all of us. Thank you.